Welcome to the new subscribers. I just want to show you something which is quite important that you see it and reason with yourselves and becoming, knowledgeable about a truth that has been hidden for thousands of years. Now, the subscribers to the channel will acknowledge that this is the age of deceit. People are recognizing lies from the government, from the establishment, the monarchies, mass media, and all the rest of it. But if that's being revealed to people, it's also the age of revelation. Things are being revealed. So rather than just looking at the lies all the time, which can be a tiresome process and very boring, you need to start finding out, well, what's the truth? Now, all societies and culture, cults being the operative word in culture, the foundation for society is religious edicts and dogma. I'm not religious. The books of the religious have been corrupted to hide a profound truth. And once you get beyond the veneer of religious bullshit, you can start to see the truth. Now, sadly, people read the book and they're trying to get understanding. That's not how it works. When a child learns to read and write, a child has no understanding of what the purpose is. It's only later, when the child is sufficiently proficient in the art of reading and writing, that they understand it's beneficial, because then they can entertain themselves with books. And I'll say this to everybody. If you want to get to the bottom of something, then you have to wade through things. And that's the same with any religious text, whether it be the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Bible, the Nag Hammadi texts, the Dead Sea Scrolls as they're commonly referred to. Now, all of these texts are allegory and metaphor, and the Bible specifically is a book about human psychology and human physiology, amongst many other things. And it is not it's not meant to be religious, but it's been made religious to fool people, to keep people trapped, to make people believe that something is going to appear in the sky to save them. And it's just an absurdity. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read some simple scriptures, okay? And then I'm going to relate the scriptures to the picture, to the image on the screen. Now, this image is the underside of the human brain. Now, your brain is God. That's why that character called Jesus said, "Isn't it not written in your law that you are gods?" Now, he was talking to the Pharisees at the time, which were religious leaders of the day. Whether or not these people existed is completely immaterial. The fact remains is that what message is being conveyed. Now, the way the character Jesus is portrayed by religion is that, oh, he loves everybody, and that's not the case. He was calling out the Pharisees for their religious horseshit. And he would say things like, "Is it not written in your law?" He was being sarcastic, and he was challenging the establishment of the day, which is what we are doing. But you have to understand that you have to challenge your own belief systems, because the age of belief is done. It's now the age of knowing. And when you have knowledge, then you can understand the simple scriptures and the message that is conveyed therein. Then you can respond. Somebody that responds to knowledge gains experience. It's an inner experience. And then you have wisdom. Now, the inner experience is the raising of energy, electromagnetic energy, up the spine into the brain. The brain is the Garden of Eden. Adam is your ego intellect. Eve is your subconscious mind. But unfortunately, because the texts have been perverted, they've made Adam into a programmed fool. and they've turned Eve, the divine feminine, into Lilith, the whore. And this is expressed by the Gnostics, people like the Essenes. So that's the underside of the brain, looking up at it. And the first piece of scripture I'm going to go through is the book of Isaiah. And it's Isaiah, what chapter? Chapter 45, verse 7. I form the light and create darkness. Now, in symbolic speech, or in mystical terms, because this is Eastern mysticism, light is consciousness, darkness is ignorance. It carries on. I make peace and create evil. Ooh. I, the Lord, do all these things. The word Lord has been added. If you have a Lord, you're not free. Okay? The fact of the matter is that these scriptures are about your brain. So your brain creates light and darkness, ignorance and enlightenment. It makes peace, and it also creates evil. So there's a duality, and it's in here. It's the brain. So that was Isaiah 45, 7. The next verse is, I'll just flip to it. Is 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 19. The throne had 6 steps, and the top of the throne was round. There's the throne, and it's round. The 6 steps are the 6 chakras which lead up to the throne. Now, the chakras are a part of your endocrine system, and they apply to the testes in males and the ovaries in females, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, the thymus, the thyroid, the pituitary. The pineal gland is the 7th gland. Biblically speaking, the number 7 means perfection. The word sin means missing the mark. The mark is the pineal gland. So when religious people or religious leaders say, oh, you're a sinner, they're using shaming tactics, and they're shaming people into the limbic system, into an area of the brain where they experience guilt, and they're looking to be saved by this religious nonsense. You've got to overcome that within yourself. And you do that by cleaning the house. Stop eating dead stuff. Processed foods, dead flesh. It's dead. It's no good for the human body. It keeps the energy low, which in turn affects consciousness. Stop drinking alcohol. We all know it affects consciousness. It turns normal, reasonable people into complete lunatics. They do things that are bad for them and others. Drink driving, etc., etc. I don't need to give you lessons on this. You have your own life experience. It's not hard to work out. So the throne had 6 steps, the chakras, and the top of the throne was round behind, and there were stays on either side on the place of the seat, and 2 lions stood beside the stays. Now that's getting into more depths esoterically. I'm not going to go into that at the moment. I'm just going to show you, right, what's been hidden from you by the lie that is religion. And this religious lie has had civilizations and societies built on top of it. Your law courts, government, all their traditions and ceremony, the monarchies of the world, they use this book and the lies of religion. They externalize God when it's inside you. It's there. That's God, the brain. And I'll show you some more. Right then. We are now into the book of Revelation. It's the last book of the Bible. It's about the revealing. So the book of Revelation, chapter 4, verse 10. The 24 elders, 4 and 20, 24, fall down before him that sat on the throne, and worship him that liveth for ever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne. The 24 elders, and they worship him that sits on the throne. The 24 elders is symbolic speech for the 12 cranial nerves, the 12 disciples. Okay? Jesus said to the disciples, go out into the lands in pairs. Each of the 12 cranial nerves is a pair. 12 pairs is 24. So a cranial nerve, one, is a pair. Messages going out, messages coming in. And it goes into the lands. This is the lands. I'll just bring this a bit closer if I can. Right, there's the brain, frontal cortex, there's the cerebellum. Just to further add to this, there's also a story of Sarah and Abraham. Sarah, Abraham, cerebrum, the left and right hemispheres of the brain. And they had a child, and the child was called Isaac. In ancient Hebrew, the name was Itzhak, and it means laughter. I'll explain that as I get to the end of this video. Now, cerebrum, Sarah, Abraham, okay, is the left and right hemispheres of the brain, the cerebrum. The cerebellum in Latin is called the arbor vitae, which means the tree of life. Now, in the Garden of Eden, there were 2 trees, and you could eat from all of the trees except for the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Okay, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because if you eat from that tree, God said you'll die. And the serpent, which is the Kundalini, electromagnetic energy, said, God said that because he knows that if you partake of this, then you will have knowledge of good and evil and be like him. Okay? So they ate the fruit, which is the duality, the Kundalini coming up into the brain, and then they recognized good and evil. And then they hid themselves in the garden because they thought they were naked. They thought they were naked because all of their belief systems had suddenly been washed away. They didn't believe in anything anymore. So now they're starting to have knowledge, not belief. Like in the book of Hosea, chapter 4, verse 6. Your people, they perish. They are destroyed through a lack of simple knowledge. Because this simple knowledge has been perverted by the establishment for hundreds of years, thousands of years. And God said to Adam and Eve, Adam, the ego intellect, Eve, the subconscious mind, and he said, who said you are naked? That's important. You're not naked. That's what religion tells you. It tells you you're a sinner. But you've got to raise that energy. You've got to clean the house. You clean the house and the energy will rise. And you'll experience higher levels of consciousness. It's that simple. But to clean the subconscious mind, you have to meditate. That cleans the subconscious. And when the subconscious mind is cleaned, she's no longer a whore. She's now Eve, the divine feminine. And she influences Adam, the ego intellect. It's very simple. The truth is always simple. It's never complex. Now there's the throne, the tree of life. It's written in the book as well. Let us go down there and confuse them. That's the electromagnetic energy going down to confuse them, lest they eat from the tree of life. The tree of life is the cerebellum. Arbor vitae. That's what it means. It means the tree of life. So here's God sitting on his throne. There's his shins, his legs, there's his belly, there's his head, and he's got his arms there. And my pen's rubbish. Look at it yourselves. Google Images. A picture paints 1,000 words. And the books are they're symbols. It's symbolism. It's a language of its own. That's why that character Jesus would always say, for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. He was talking to specific people. People that want to know. They want to see. He wasn't talking to the blind. Anyway. 4. There's one verse in the Bible. It's in the book of Psalms. And it is Psalm 137, verse 9. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones. Okay, in common parlance, you'll be happy if you smash your children against the stones. Oh my God, the biblical God is Satan. No. Again, it's symbolistic speech. And it's been written in this way to hide a profound truth. Once a month, your brain releases a secretion. And they call it the sacred secretion. Google it. Even Jim Carrey is talking about this. And the sacred secretion travels down into hell, or Sheol, as it's known by the Jews, the place of no light. And then after 2.5 days, it ascends and it rises back up. But if the body is unclean, then where that secretion is, where it travels in the cerebrospinal fluid, if that wine is old, it kills the secretion. But if the cerebrospinal fluid is clean, it rises up and goes into the 4th ventricle of the brain, and it is burnt off as the sacrificial lamb. That secretion contains DMT, dimethyltryptamine. That's why the hippies say, I'm tripping. Dimethyltryptamine. And it touches the pineal gland, which is the stone. And it gets burnt off. DMT, when it burns, it makes rainbow colours. And if you go into other parts of the book where God spoke to Abraham and Sarah, he made a covenant with them, and the rainbow will be the sign of his promise. So when you raise a secretion and you see the rainbow colours, then you are, symbolically speaking, face to face with God, higher consciousness. That's what it's all about. It isn't about some bearded bloke sat on a cloud with King David next to him playing a bloody harp. That's just ridiculous. But people believe this nonsense. People actually believe that Jesus is going to return on the clouds, as it's written in the book of Revelation. The cloud, or the sky, is symbolic of consciousness, and the clouds are symbolics of thought. And it's people's ego intellect that gets in the way, and it causes them to stumble. But when you clean your house, things start to make sense. And your older brother will teach you. Because the ego intellect wasn't always there. Who was you before your ego intellect arrived on the scene? The ego intellect likes to identify with things. It will say things like, oh, I'm a soldier, I'm a veteran, I've done this and I've done that, and I'm from this country and I do these things. That's me, Belfast, 1989, young soldier. But it's not me. That was the illusion that my ego intellect created. And it told himself this story. His story, the ego intellect's story. His story, history. And when everyone's trapped in this illusion of the mind and experiencing the illusion of separation, nothing will make any sense. Because everything's corrupted, everything's a lie. So what's the truth? You exist. You have one of these. If you're a meat eater and drink alcohol, your cerebrospinal fluid will be acidic. So your God, your brain, is taking an acid bath. And people tell you, oh, it's natural. No, it's not. Why would you believe the medical establishment? They don't cure people. They treat symptoms. They're not interested in the cause of anything. If they could fix things, they'd make no money. And they love money. And the love of money is the root of all evil. So all they do is treat symptoms. When you clean the house, your cerebrospinal fluid becomes alkaline, which is the natural state for the human brain. And then it can function as it was designed to do so. And your body can function as it was designed to do so. The ego intellect has no idea how the brain functions. It has no idea how the body does things. Those are automated processes. But the ego intellect says things like, but I like steak, I like a beer, because the taste buds reign over common sense. Except common sense is not common. And I've just told you some profound truths that have been hidden from humanity for thousands of years. And whenever you mention this book, it's like, oh, you're religious. Religion has turned the book into such a farce that people will avoid it avoid being accused of being religious. And I encourage everybody to read it, but don't read it trying to understand it. Just read the bloody thing. From the front to the rear. It is not a catalogue where you just pick out verses. I've picked out verses then to demonstrate a point, but I've read this book and I know it. And I read it front to rear. 3 hours a day, took me 3 weeks. Your subconscious mind takes it all in. And as you clean your house, it all starts to make sense. And your subconscious mind comes online. Your sleeping beauty has come online as she starts to show you things. And when the student is ready, the ego intellect, the master will appear. The master is your own higher consciousness, the great I am, your older brother. It's simple. It is simple knowledge that is then responded to, and it becomes experience, which begets wisdom. Now, why did Jesus say to the Pharisees, your law? Because they turned the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, which is the ancient text. And the Torah is basically an instructions for living. It's not laws. How can you be free if there's laws? They're instructions. You either respond and raise your consciousness, or you just remain a moron. A moron, mentally deficient. Mentally deficient, not knowing what really is. The ego intellect that lives in a dirty house experiences the illusion of separation. And it's that illusion of the ego intellect that needs to be overcome. And you raise that energy. And you turn your lamp on. The seat of consciousness. The pineal gland. And you keep the oil in the lamp clean. And you store it. As is referenced in the parable of the 5 wise virgins and the 5 foolish virgins that were going to marry the groom, the higher consciousness. When you understand this basic knowledge, this is no longer a nonsense. But whatever the religious people spew is just utter garbage, have nothing to do with them. And then when you start looking at our leaders, the likes of Boris Johnson, and you've got the monarchy, these self-proclaimed descendants of Jesus Christ, it becomes utterly farcical. That's it. You are gods. It's there. It's in the pictures. Allegory. Symbolism. And people run from symbolism. Oh, it's the Illuminati because there's a triangle with an eye in it. The eye, the all-seeing eye, is the pineal gland. Illuminate yourself. Illumination. It's difficult. It's not easy. It's a bumpy road. But it's the only road worth taking.